So it's 1979. This guy called Hayao Miyazaki. Oh, you've never heard of him? Well, that's fair enough. Well, he was an animator for about 15 years before he decided that he wanted to start directing, and then he got a chance to do his first feature. That sounds like quite the triumph to me.
I'm a member of a famous movie club for more than 20 years, and I had heard all the members were raving about your movie, Castle of Cagliostro.
Thank you so much, but I also have so many bitter memories and regret about that movie. Or not, I guess, okay. But this movie still persists in the Lupin franchise to this day as one of the most popular and celebrated, reaching to people beyond the actual fandom. And that was a fandom that almost didn't exist. It's the early 70s and Miyazaki's edging his way out of his Toei contract. Cue Otsuka at TMS. Once a mentor to Miyazaki, he was then adapting movements, but now with tanks sometimes? And yes, that pissed off the original creator. Despite this, it became a factor in convincing both Takahata and Miyazaki to join Otsuka at TMS, that and the sizable salary increase. The gang planned to work on Pippi Longstockings, an adaptation anime, which was axed before it began. Now, what do you do with them? Well, TMS had this new show that was bombing, had some bad ratings, it was a little bit too edgy for the time, and the sponsors were complaining. The duo were thrown into A Productions while the prior director is kicked out. It's your show now, go wild, although dramatically changing hands isn't a good way to keep up a weekly schedule. Who knew? Certainly not me. So it turned into a complete mess. One where the staff actually had a good time, even when they were getting cancelled. We had a lot of fun and did what we wanted to do. Somehow Lupin survived, rising from the ashes after enough reruns, bringing a new season and a box office hit. Then TMS requested Otsuka be the next director, but he had a better idea. Miyazaki. He saw Lupin as a product of the era, the new developed Japan steeped in apathy. This bored trust fund kid who steals for the hell of it. He wasn't a fan, so he changed Lupin on his TV run to be less French aristocrat and more poor Italian with a happy-go-lucky flavour. But I had to rethink the whole character Lupin all over again. He's over the fame and status which came with money. He is no longer a man who would pull out the most rare, expensive cigarette lighter. He is fine with a cheap disposable one as long as it gets the job done. So I hear that the fans were looking for a dark, serious, calculated, mastermind Lupin were greatly disappointed by this film. I didn't want that. I thought that this film should be universally appealing. Speaking of Universal, this opening tells you everything you need to know about this Lupin. The synergy and synchronized movement highlighting the excellent character acting. The words are irrelevant, all you need to know is these are two master thieves ahead of their game even when it doesn't look like that. The high-strung strings bring attention to the escape, offset by the synth chord's comedic foil.
The first real shot you get of Lupin and Jigen, and for a lot of people it was their first introduction to these characters, period, is them, leaping over those rails like track stars. That is so easy and immediately endearing, and you automatically love these guys, and you love that it's like, oh, hell yeah.
Oh, son of a bitch!
And that's it. That's all you need. Hey, it's Shaves! It's so absurd. It's like, yeah, it's a crime, but you completely forget about it. It's just like, yeah, whatever.
The music too, because it has a sort of big band, jazzy, almost like the Fair kind of feeling to it as they sort of spin their way through traffic in like such a reckless way.
Right. And I think that's like the main appeal to the series, according to the author, Monkey Punch. He said that the core appeal was freedom, that Lupin's able to do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, whenever he wants. It's less like a lot of what other Lupin does, where there's a lot of deception and like almost espionage in a way, because they're trying to be covert and trying to steal this treasure or whatever. But here it's just very brazen. They just got the money bags on their shoulders and stuff, and it's very simple and you get it.
A carefree energy fills the screen like faulty bills, and by doing so, Lupin rejects the cheap frills and the formula seen in the Red Jacket show for something more mysterious. The introspective tone in the main title isn't something you'd expect from Lupin, from a series always in constant forward momentum.
The momentum eases up a lot. I think it's because it was trying to jolt you awake. The opening is to kind of really arrest your attention. And then it is introspective and slower, but you can't beat Fire Treasure. Fire Treasure is literally one of the best songs in the franchise in 50 years.
It's amazing, and it has so many different motifs. There's at least 3 versions in the film.
But also just every single shot has some very specific color and movement going on. It's all different. You get that they're on a journey somewhere, but every single sequence is very striking. It feels like months is going by, like a road trip, like a real road trip.
I think you could even make an argument that it's sort of blending you into the world Miyazaki wants, because the opening is very almost traditional Lupin. It's it's a heist, it's a casino, and then afterwards you slowly go on this trip to then this fantastical land with secret castles with mechanical clock parts where everything is still run in a very monarchy way.
It's the little things, man. It's like the syncopation of visuals and music in that opening that it's why you just keep coming back to media.
Yeah, the title opening is almost more faithful to the tone than the actual set piece at the beginning.
Yeah, to the whole movie, I agree. But I think the bursts of energy in the opening scene do apply to the car chase, for example. There's this very clear momentum that's very gripping that I think is prevalent through the whole film. And it's not completely uncharacteristic.
Not that I think it's uncharacteristic. I got an impression, and maybe this is the production speaking, that a lot of the more wistful, calming moments of the day-to-day motions of Cagliostro are sort of hanging out, chilling out, thinking, reflecting, looking at stuff, because those intense moments are so hard to do with such a tight deadline that they kind of need to slow down, even mentally, to do those scenes.
Yeah, you think it's an economic choice? That's interesting.
I think it's a bit of both.
It's silly because most of the TV specials were made in the course of a year of each other, and almost none of them have that. They don't take any time to absorb their surroundings, soak any atmosphere in. It's all just really boring talking and sitting in a cramped hotel room or whatever.
Castle of Cagliostro was like a clearance sale of all that I had done on Lupin during my Toei days. I mean, he's not wrong. You can stitch the plot together of the movie from several different episodes. There's no original ideas, and Miyazaki's career is as circular as his detest for otaku. It's also commonly cited that Cagliostro was a do-over of the finale of Puss in Boots. Sparks of those Toei days live throughout. Not a bad thing necessarily, it's a fine tribute to bygone days. Yet it goes further than that. A major inspiration came from the novel The Haunted Tower. From the secret treasure to the big old clock tower to its hidden traps, I wanted to create a film using that material, so I mixed the two together, although there is something else involved within the movie, which itself left a long-term impact on the franchise. The everyman of Italian cars, the Fiat 500, it's Lupin's perfect companion on all his heists. It's small, scrappy, and has that endless maneuverability, representing Lupin's underdog status in the face of the impossible, slapsticking by the skin of his teeth. And while Season 1 introduced it, it was Cagliostro that made it a star. On the chase, there is something quite fun about the way it uses the Fiat especially, because there's sort of an energy with the car that goes beyond reality. And maybe this is good with what Lupin can do in that the Tom and Jerry way, right? But it has a cartoonish energy that the car sort of represents in the way it bounces around, or it could take a grenade to the face but come out just sort of looking a little worse for wear. But specifically what I always remember, the elbow smash, like they're having so much fun in the scene, and I guess maybe it's infectious. You see the contrast between these two characters in that like Jigen will smash the window with his gun, but Lupin will just use his elbow like really furiously. Abandonment out the window, basically.
Right when that shot starts, I love that as soon as they realize that the grenade is coming, you see the entire car also kind of flinches the way they flinch. So like there's like a bump up. It's so good.
It's such a character in itself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so nimble. You feel like it's able to jump. It's like Herbie or something, you know? It's just, man, but there's just so much detail in it. It's incredible, dude.
Yeah, it's just so like kinetic as like a scene. Even just like the way the car can just boost itself.
And also, there's something a little kind of uncharacteristic of Jigen in that scene, but I still love. When he shoots the car, it finally punctures the tires and he gets them. He cheers. He's just like, Yatta! And he just never ever does that. Ever in like any, like I can't think of another time where he like he really cheers at something he does. He's usually a lot cooler about that, but like
it is endearing. It's that sort of like, maybe this is a lot of like Miyazaki's tone, but the characters tend to not hide their emotions. They're always very open about how they feel in the scene, and then you kind of like get with them.
What the? Get in!
Kind of what makes this chase scene stand out, among many other things, in the entire franchise. It's one of the only chase scenes I can think of where Lupin is actually chasing something rather than being chased. He's usually the Jerry and kind of getting away and stuff. When you have chase scenes like that, it feels like they could go on for a long time. It feels kind of temporary. Or it's like, yeah, you got to wait for now type of thing. But when he's chasing something like he is in Cagliostro, there's a very definite feeling of urgency and, oh, they're going to get away. You know, we have to do this before they get to this girl. So there's a more heightened urgency to the chase. So the audience, it's a lot more gripping in that way.
And that's all thanks to one man, Yasuo Otsuka. Hey, what's that over there? Oh, that looks good. It's cheap and beat up. Well, the junk he points to is no others than the animation director himself, who was first scouted by TMS on the racetrack. Lupin convinced him to leave Toei, working from the pilot until the new millennium, bringing his technical proficiency to the franchise. While dealing with mechanics, he knew how to draw this Fiat from any angle. Otsuka was very good at drawing from life, and going that one step beyond. However, could he take that approach with the staff of Telecom? Telecom didn't have the best reputation at the time. A lot of fresh talent with no formal training, who'd been thrown in the deep end. Yeah, just learn how to animate by making features. It's so simple. It's not simple at all. After Mamo involved a colossal amount of corrections, Miyazaki was sweating a bit. So to ease his concerns, they sniped a couple ex-Nippon staff, maybe grabbed a couple from O Productions, so they could at least have a good solid amount of key animators to work with. One problem. 7 months. Just 7 months for 43,000 frames and 100 minutes of film. It took 2 months to script and storyboard. Well, if you consider a finished storyboard to be like a quarter done. Leaving only 4.5 months to animate it all. We didn't go home all through the night, sometimes without dinner. By the end, they were dying of exhaustion. Why such a tight schedule for a follow-up to a successful movie? I mean, I don't know, stop thinking you fuck. Just keep working yourself to death. Animators' rights, I've never heard of them. Come on, guys. The animation's pretty great, though, isn't it? I mean, isn't it pretty good? It's pretty great, right? Well, it's not worth the suffering, but still, Telecom showed themselves to have a massive potential. No Miyazaki cuts, just corrections. I am the director, and people often mistakenly think I make it solely on my own. That's not true. There is legendary Kazuhide Tomonaga, responsible for the several iconic chase scenes in the movie, and also known for creating the opening to the Batman animated series, or Atsuko Tanaka, a standout of the new Telecom staff, who went on to work with Ghibli for a very long history as well as on movie cuts in general. She's spoken at length about how it is to work with Miyazaki, and to put it bluntly, it sounds like smacking your head against the concrete. We know he's a grunt, but he basically would just be shouting at anyone who didn't get it perfect, and he'd always heavily correct things, down to the most minute feature. It could be anywhere between 2 to 10 changes per frame. He wouldn't even let Otsuka, the animation director, animate the women or correct them. When Tanaka asked for a couple finished cells of hers, Miyazaki was still leaving corrections on them, regardless if the production had finished months ago. Yeah, what a nice fella. Miyazaki's main regrets within the movie seem to be with the film length and the schedule. We determined that we couldn't complete the tasks required. They had the ABCD plan, but because of the amount of time and tightness of the schedule, they had to do a strategic withdrawal. So because of this compromise, I felt like a sense of psychological defeat.
That might tie into his work later on as a filmmaker, and also probably why he doesn't want to do TV anime, because TV anime has those time constraints. I'm totally fine with Miyazaki not having so much complexity and 4 different conclusions and things like that. That level of complexity is something that other Lupin try to do, and I think it really bogs their films down. I think the simplicity of Cagliostro is really quite an advantage, and it's something that I wish more Lupin had, where it's very simple on its face. I think all that complexity and things like that can get in the way of the action and adventure, which is the best aspects of Lupin. I think it's why people want to go to see Lupin.
Fair damsel believes in the power of the wicked sorcerer, yet she has no faith in the powers of the thief. Oh, if only she'd believe in him. Then he'd be able to fly through the air.
Even with the green jacket, this Lupin's kind of like the Robin Hood equivalent of Lupin.
Yeah, very gentleman thief and less evil.
Maybe it's because it has such a traditional swashbuckling angle with Lupin trying to save the princess and getting into all these situations with a dark, evil sort of prince that's very of that era. You could almost argue that it's mainly Jigen and Lupin that get a lot of the play until Sanigata gets there.
Yeah, for sure. But it's still not as bad as some other Lupin where Goemon doesn't show up for 40 minutes of the special. But Monkey Punch made a comment how it wasn't until the anime version where all 5 of those characters had to be in the movie. In his manga, they were all individuals that were acting independently, and sometimes their paths would cross and sometimes they would team up, but they weren't staples or a requirement the way that we see them now. And that was all from the anime specifically. What sucks though is that later on that became such a requirement that when they did stories that didn't necessarily require some characters, they had a story in some of these specials where they didn't really have anything for Zenigata to do. They couldn't find a way to fit him in, so he's just kind of there and he doesn't do anything, and he just kind of looks like a clueless idiot. And it's really annoying. It wastes time for the movie and disrespects his character. Especially in Cagliostro, he has some dignity and respect to him. He's a character in his own right.
I was going to say, I actually think that Cagliostro has some of the best Sanigata moments, definitely. One of my favorite moments in the whole franchise is when he busts into the printing press room.
Those look like printing presses. And what do I see over there? Oh my, these are yen. Could they be counterfeit?
He's God, he's a bad actor. It does suck when Jigen and Goemon get shafted, or some of these other characters, and it feels like that for Cagliostro. Goemon gets very, very little.
Although what he does get is actually very good.
Exactly. So that's why I kind of think that spectacle is a more core component to this series, because you can make any character super memorable through one really badass act. It could just be one.
Maybe it's actually a betterment as well. That you don't want to
because
bog down the film.
It's better than the more screen time you give them, the more opportunity that you have to fuck up their character.
I was really taken aback after finishing the first series and just how fantastic the soundtrack is in Cagliostro. It's kind of on such a different level. It was almost jaw-dropping to see that contrast.
Yeah, because I think a lot of those instrumentations are in part 2. because Yuji Ono does do the music in part 2, and a lot of those compositions are there. But you're right. I think it's one thing to have music by Yuji Ono and how good the music is on its own. And it's an entirely different thing to be like, okay, put it here, score this scene, right?
Yeah, the way it's scored, especially like this film has so much Mickey Mousing, like in terms of like how it follows the action, which is such a classical animation feature, but it fits Lupin so perfectly.
Yeah, it's so vital.
Even just like in the basics of his style, in that like almost you have East versus West at times with its use of funk and soul and other like sometimes more traditional Japanese material, and old versus new, where it can sometimes go from like a very classical orchestrated soundtrack to something that's way more contemporary, using synths and of the era.
Definitely. I agree with that. Unfortunately, yeah, a lot of Lupin goes on autopilot. It's like, yeah, we have these classic themes that everyone loves, and we just play those, and it's easy. They don't take as much care or consideration into it as this film, I think.
Billions of bucks with unmarked cereals. We're rich bastards.
Hey, don't drown me in it.
Often goes very uncredited how superior that dub is to me.
That was the first dub I saw of Lupin, and I think David Hayter did leave a very much impression of what Lupin should sound like. Since then, I've heard many different voice actors do Lupin from Japanese to English. I do think he really held it together with like what this character should be in that moment, mixed it between the cheeky and like selfless hero position.
Because like he does have those goofier moments. The Hayter does have that like the hee, you know?
He really sells them as well.
Yeah, exactly. But like it sounds masculine. Not that the other ones don't sound masculine, it just sounds way more Mickey Mouse, like way too cartoony. There's some anime that I think that works perfectly. Like you want them to sound like that.
Yeah, of course.
And I would say, I guess like part 3 or some of the other more cartoony entries of Lupin, probably you would argue that. But like, I'm sorry, man, but when I'm listening to the Koike movies and that's the voice that comes out of them, I'm just like,
It probably is a little bit harder for that to
not
hit.
the same.
The iconic English Lupin voice actor was pretty much defined in season 2's kind of more wacky, laid-back, naughty kind of era. So when you get something like Hyoke, which is just such a different tone, and you bring the same kind of voice acting, there may be a dissonance where like perhaps someone like David Hayter, though he probably would never return to the franchise,
Unfortunately.
someone who's spent so many years playing these roles in Metal Gear, which is a game which is both unbelievably camp but undyingly serious, knows how to balance these realms very expertly.
You're not gonna keep secrets from me. Come on, Chuck.
No!
But then I listened to the Manga UK dub, which was the first I ever heard Jigen. That's such a different voice for him. He has this gremlin kind of voice. Which like works so perfectly with that Jigen that I think has kind of become more of the Jigen for the part 4 and part 5 Jigen. He has more kind of a gremlin-y, toothy...
They're bogus? You're just pulling my chain. These look real to me.
Otherwise, it's funny. Like, I feel like every other person's voice sounds very similar to the regular dub. I think it's only Lupin and Jigen that sound very distinctively unique, and just in Cagliostro where they sound like that. And it works so fucking well.
Manga Video doesn't tend to do dubs either. Like, it happens occasionally, but it's quite a rare feat.
But yeah, I'm so happy it happened, because I wouldn't have it any other way. It's one of the many reasons why it pushes it over the top as the best one for me, and it's the only one with that dub.
Yeah, it kind of gives it a unique quality. You could...
Yeah, completely standalone.
So Shaves, I know you've just finished every piece of Lupin media ever. How do you think Cagliostro shapes up in the franchise? You've also made a video about it that's over here. Let me put that in there.
Well, I want to clarify. I've seen every Lupin anime. I've not read the manga, and I'm not bothering with any of the live action stuff. I just don't want to bother. I was just focused and interested in all of the Lupin anime, which, yeah, I watched all of. Wasn't worth it. It's not. Don't do it. This was my first Lupin way back in middle school, like decades ago, and it's still my favorite by leaps and bounds. It's kind of embarrassing how much better it is compared to the majority of the series. I do like other entries. I do love Liberty Crisis, directed by Osamu Dezaki.
I've seen that one,
I love a lot of the Koike stuff. My favorite of his being Blood Spray. I love that one. Even though it's like based on some whatever reason, like I think Liberty Crisis didn't have the time or the attention that like he gave to Space Adventure Cobra or Go-Go 13. With Blood Spray, it's great, but you can tell it's only one entry out of everything, and so it doesn't stand alone. Yeah, I think I think all of them stand alone, but like Cagliostro feels like a peak, whereas Blood Spray feels like kind of part of this really good range that's a little shallower than like the peak of Cagliostro, I would say.
See, it seems to me that like Lupin is a franchise that thrives when it has a director who has a very strong vision and style to sort of bring that element out of Lupin.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I would say it's because I think a lot of great directors recognize when they have a property that has this appeal of freedom.
So, Shaves, would you recommend Cagliostro?
Yes. Yes, I very much would. Having seen all of Lupin, it makes me think, like, should it be the first Lupin you watch? Because then everything else is really not as good as in comparison. At least to me.
As someone who watched that first as well, I think it got me interested enough to continue watching the series and looking through it as long as I have.
Oh, it definitely did me too.
So it did its job.
Exactly.
I've seen the film at least 3 times in my life in like core times that I remember. Once when I was probably about 16. That's probably the first time I saw anything Lupin related. I saw it, and it was the David Hayter dub, so it obviously has a special place in my heart in that point there. And I thought it was like 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. And then a couple years ago, I rewatched it when I was going through a Miyazaki video or something like that. And I wasn't actually feeling as strong with it because I think I was seeing it in relation to all these futures titles and all these other different things I was watching. I wasn't necessarily putting it in the position of like the origins of which it was made, which would more be, what 70s stuff has Miyazaki done at that time? How does it stack up to like his prior work beforehand, where like it's just night and day? And I think that really helped me contextualize how I feel about the film overall. It gave me like a new layer of respect for it.
Yeah, I think so too. It's good to have the context for any series you watch, I think.
Absolutely. I don't know if there's anything else to say.
No, probably not.
Miyazaki took these ideas forward in later shows and movies. While leaving an impact on the culture, its final set piece became a staple of animation homage for decades to come. Clarice gained a cult following, especially in the otaku sphere, to the repulsion of Miyazaki. But the most fascinating is the rumours of its impact on Steven Spielberg. Back in the 80s when Miyazaki was working on the Nemo film, this was in LA, they brought a film reel of Cagliostro to show the animators and other exclusive VIPs. Among them, allegedly, is Mr. Spielberg, who then went on to create Indiana Jones. With his own treasure hunts and car chases, there's definitely a similar tone to it all. That could have been all coincidence. However, in 1985, in the movie Goonies, it features the arcade game Cliffhanger, which just so happens to be basically Dragon's Lair, but with Cagliostro clips. On top of that, Manga UK released a DVD in the new millennium, which featured a quote from the man himself. One of the greatest adventure movies of all time. A quote that no one seems to be able to find the source of. But Spielberg has mentioned in his past his love for Miyazaki, especially in recent interviews. It wouldn't be insane to think he saw this at some point. Either way, next time Miyazaki takes quite a different approach as he makes his Nausicaa movie, with almost as tight of a deadline. We'll get there eventually. Before I go, there's a couple things. Thank you for Shapes being in the video. Here's a link to his video. Very cool, very cool. And then I was in an article being interviewed of recent days. If it's available, I will link it on the screen and in the description or something. But next month we have Red Line. We're probably going to be talking about Goro a little bit. Maybe we'll do some other stuff. It's going to be a wild month, February. February's going to be going insane with stuff. But before we go, let's thank those patrons. Now, I've got a couple of things going on with the Patreon. The new reaction series for $5. There's also the Discord. There's etc. Commentaries. There's a lot happening there. So we're going to have Joven, Alex Marathi, Daniel Strait, and Stephen's mum. Thanks, mum. And the cat will see us out.